Jesus, the Rabbi, Chapter 17 of Polygamy in the Bible, pages 168 to 179. There was a man of the Pharisees, named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. The same came to Jesus by night, and said unto him, Rabbi, we know thou art a teacher come from God. John 3, 1-2. To understand the nature and mission of the life of Christ, one must first understand the lineage, traditions and the religion into which he was born. History has accurately confirmed his birth, childhood, and adult life in a Jewish society. He honored Jewish laws, he taught in Jewish synagogues, and eventually became a Jewish rabbi. His life's mission was dedicated and foreordained to be a part of the Jewish society, and the events of his life were ultimately fulfilled according to prophecies in the tribe of Judah. Unlike other nations, the tribe of Judah was distinct in its moral and physical laws. The purpose of cleansing or purifying the body and soul was for dedication and preparation for the Messiah, who would be born through that sacred lineage. When the great prophet Jacob bestowed a patriarchal blessing upon the heads of his 12 sons, Judah was given the distinction of receiving the promised lineage of this predicted Redeemer. C. 169, Genesis 49, 10. The eating habits were restricted by spiritual laws to purify the blood, and marriage laws were jealously observed by the Jewish community to prevent any contaminating values and ideals. Every Jewish woman lived with the hope and desire of being honored to bear the chosen Messiah or Savior of the world. At the age of 12, Jesus was found in the temple talking to the learned elders of Zion. He was telling them that he was about his Father's business, which was teaching, instructing and counseling and not carpentry work, as some modern divines teach us. But there was a particular reason for the delay in the actual ministry of Jesus. We read that it was not until he was about 30 years of age that he organized his church. This indicates that he was complying with one of the laws required to fulfill the office and calling of a rabbi among the tribe of Judah. When Jesus was 30 years of age, he was baptized, fasted for 40 days, and then began his teaching career as a rabbi. Compliance to Jewish laws, regulations and rules was absolutely necessary, or the high priests and Pharisees would have legal reasons to reject him in their councils. Jesus knew this, and warned his disciples to carefully obey the law because they sit in Moses' seat, or therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do. Matt 23, 2-3. The chief priests and council of the Pharisees were continually using lawyers in their attempts to trap Jesus for violating even the most minute laws of the Hebrew nation. Jesus, however, could recite the law in his own defense, and by the same law often condemned them for their infractions of that law. 170. It should be noted that Jesus was often called Rabbi. For a better understanding of that title, we refer to the Jewish explanation. Rabbi, the Hebrew term used as a title for those who are distinguished for learning, who are the authoritative teachers of the Lord, and who are the appointed spiritual heads of the community. The function of the rabbi of the Talmud was to teach the members of the community the scriptures and the oral and transitional laws. For the first position, the rabbi was elected by the leaders of the community. For the second, by the members of the judiciary, while the third position was a matter of duty imposed upon the rabbi by the very law he was teaching. The Jewish Encyclopedia, Volume 10, 294. The title of rabbi justly applied to Jesus, both as to the office and the respect that went with it. With that official title, Jesus could teach wherever and whenever he was impressed to do so. As a rabbi, he taught thousands on the mountainside, by the seashore, and in the synagogues. On one occasion he used a whip in the temple and overturned tables, leaving a very impressionable lesson. Furthermore, if Jesus was not a rabbi according to that Judaic legal system, he would have immediately renounced the title. His chief apostle, Peter, often called him Rabbi, Mark 9:5, 11:21, but received no word of correction from Jesus, indicating that the title was properly applied. When Jesus was called Rabbi by Judas, Matt 26:25, 49, and by Nathanael, John 1:49, 171, and the other disciples, John 1:38, 4:31, 9, 2, 11, 8, he acknowledged the title without dispute. Great masses of the people also called him Rabbi, see John 6:25. And when Nicodemus, a Pharisee and a ruler of the Jews, acknowledged Jesus as Rabbi, it was conclusive evidence that Jesus was indeed a Jewish rabbi. Jesus lived through a constant barrage of attacks against his birth, character, authority, doctrine and the law. If he had been guilty of neglecting the law on any point, it would have given his enemies their greatest advantage to dispute his claim. Yet if Jesus had lived a celibate life, as most clergymen teach today, it would have been the most powerful weapon to prove that Jesus was not the promised Messiah. It was against the traditional and scriptural law for a rabbi to remain single. Jesus could avoid this pitfall only by obeying the rabbinical law of marriage. Celibacy is by no means a virtue among the Jewish people. Indeed, it is for this reason that many Jews cannot accept Christianity. Said Rabbi Hirsch, "Now as the life of Jesus is pictured in the New Testament, there are certain peculiar defects in that life, from the Jewish point of view. His teachings are the ideal teachings of Judaism. They are not new teachings, nor new revelations. They are confirmations of Jewish thought and life. But his personal life and I am speaking respectfully. I do not think anyone should think I cast any shadow on the beauty and perfection of that life, but I can take it as it is." 172, pictured and you know he was not married, and from the Jewish point of view, that is a defect. The Jewish morality insists that a man who does not assume the social responsibility for the continuation of society, lives a life that is not complete. My Religion, Rabbi Emil Hirsch, New York, 1925, p. 43-44. In the Jewish society, both ancient and modern, marriage is a sacred and compulsory law. It was strictly observed, and a wedding was considered a time for rejoicing, when performed at a very early age. Every Jewish man should marry at 18, and he who marries earlier is more meritorious. The Shulchan Ibn Hazer 1:3. Since the Mishnah fixes the 18th year of one's life as the age of marriage, a man unmarried after this time is, in many communities, regarded as not having conformed with inviolable tradition. Jewish Ceremonies and Customs, William Racine, p. 155. Marriage was firmly implanted in the minds of all Jewish men. However, it was most rigidly observed by those who complied to the laws and offices of rabbi and priest. Jewish law required a high priest to be married on that Day of Atonement. And so important was this law that in the case of some unforeseen circumstance, an extra woman was held in readiness for the marriage. Marriage on the day of 173 Atonement was a prerequisite for entering the sanctuary. Paul wrote that Jesus was the great high priest who would make atonement for all men. Since one of the laws of the high priest office was marriage, then every priest including Jesus had to comply with that ordinance to fulfill the obligation of that office. Also, Paul wrote in an epistle that Christ has not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Heb. 9, 24. Now if the law required a high priest to be married so he could enter the holy place, which is a figure of the true, then how much more demanding would be the requirements of the Messiah, who was the great high priest, who stood in that holy place. When Jesus was asked about marriage and divorce, see Matt 19, 3-6, he supported the law of Moses, and also the first law of marriage given in the Garden of Eden. This gave a tenable sanction to that law, both to the Judaic nation and everyone else, including himself. Under the Talmudic law, a man was not considered worthy to be called righteous if he did not marry and have children. How could Jesus support the marriage law with words, yet denounce it in his own life and still be called righteous? We have nothing written in the Bible about Jesus from the age of 12 to 30. This was the part of a man's life when marriage and the raising of children were obligatory and would have given us the account of his family. That book, or history, is 174 missing, like many other parts of the Bible. From the age of 12 to 30, a gap of 18 years, the only piece of information on the life of Jesus is that he grew in wisdom, an extremely insufficient record in the life of one so important as the Redeemer of the world. John, the beloved disciple of Jesus, said the words and deeds of Jesus were sufficient to fill libraries. John 21:25, from his testimony, we can be sure that much more occurred in the life of Christ than is contained in the brief history of the four Gospels. It is almost certain that any information recorded of his younger life would have informed us that Jesus was married. Wouldn't it seem very strange, if not inconsistent, that the Good Shepherd would lead mankind by his perfect example in all things, except marriage? Is it possible that Jesus would command, advocate and quote the laws of marriage, but reluctantly, and without valid excuse, refrain from obedience to them? Reason, evidence in the scriptures all prove that he taught and obeyed every law of the gospel. How could Jesus say, "Follow me," as a perfect example of righteousness, and remain single and thus obligating everyone else to be single? To believe such a doctrine would overthrow every law ever given concerning marriage, and Jesus did not do that. If Jesus was a bachelor, he would have justly been condemned by the Pharisees. They would have mentioned it many times, and it would have been a major reason for them to refute his claim to authority, and to condemn his veracity as a teacher. Recent manuscripts found in Qumran and other excavations have introduced further information to substantiate Christ's marriage. In the Gospel 175, according to Thomas, there are significant references to the marriage of Jesus. Log 22. They less than the disciples greater than said to him, "Shall we then, being children, enter the kingdom?" Jesus said to them, "When you make the two one, less than one flesh and or marriage greater than, and when you make the inner as the outer, and when you make the male and the female into a single one, less than married greater than, so that the male will not be male and the female less than not greater than be female. Then shall you enter less than the kingdom greater than." Log 114, Simon Peter said to them, "Let Mary go out from among us, because women are not worthy of the life." Jesus said, "See, I shall lead her, so that I will make her male, less than one in marriage greater than, that she too may become a living spirit, resembling you males. For every woman who makes herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven." The Gospel according to Thomas, p. 57. Coptic text established and translated by A. Lormont, etc., 1959, and in another apocryphal manuscript called the Gospel of Philip. Log 32, there were three who walked with the Lord at all times, Mary his mother and his sister and Magdalene, whom they called his consort. for Mary was the name of his sister and his mother and his consort. Consort, 1. A husband or wife. The World Book Encyclopedia Dictionary, 1966, 176, log 55. And the consort of Christ is Mary Magdalene. The Lord loved Mary more than all the disciples, and kissed her on the mouth often. The others too. They said to him, "Why do you love her more than all of us?" The Saviour answered and said to them, "Why do I not love you like her?" The Gospel of Philip, p. 35 and 39-40. Translated from the Coptic text, with an introduction and commentary by R. Michael Wilson, B.D., Ph.D. London, 1962. In the commentary of this book, Dr. Wilson quotes Peter as saying, "We know that the Saviour loved you more than other women," referring to Mary Magdalene, and he quotes Levi as saying later, "He loved her more than us." Even many other known books of the New Testament are missing, such as an earlier epistle of Paul to the Corinthians, Icor 5:9, another epistle of Paul to the Ephesians, If 3:3, an epistle of Paul from Laodicea, Col 4:16, a former epistle of Jude, Jude 1:3, prophecies of Enoch, Jude 1:14, because great portions of the story of Christianity have been lost, discarded, or altered, the true facts are difficult, if not impossible, to find. And to these hazy scraps of history, have been added dogmas, rituals, and the traditions of men. The voices of Catholicism and Protestantism are repeating the error of this historical patchwork of human creations. 177. Throughout the centuries of time these celibate traditions evolved into church law, and that law, in turn, was advocated as historical fact. The real facts remain like a skeleton of the original structure of Christianity. So aloof from the real truth are these traditions that facts appear strange, if not erroneous, when brought to light. The history of the marriage law of Christianity is not valid, because it has evolved through centuries of traditional customs, philosophies, and man-managing, especially through channels which have corrupted almost every other doctrine and ordinance of a sacred gospel. The laws of the marriage covenant have become as perverted as any other part of our religious history. Through the traditions and assumptions of men, celibacy became not only an accepted doctrine of the Church for men and women, but even for Christ. Celibacy had no recognition within the Scriptures. Ancient Jewish law and early Christian law sanctioned and required their disciples to obey the marriage covenant. If the apostles fulfilled the law of marriage, it is only reasonable to assume that they were obeying that law by sanction and direction of Christ. And though Jesus gave and instructed his disciples in all of the laws of the gospel, including marriage, it is most unreasonable that he would neglect or refuse to obey that law himself. Marriage was a union so sacred and spiritual in its nature that man and woman were to become one flesh. Genesis 2:24. Matt 19:5. This inseparable union, 178, is spiritually illustrated by comparison with Christ to his church. If 5:30. God has given a multitude of laws and commandments concerning marriage, but none restraining marriage. Rather, he restricted anything that would break the bonds of marriage. Among the perils to marriage was the doctrine of celibacy, which was never acceptable in ancient Israel, no, in early Christianity, but rather a doctrine of pagans. It finally became incorporated into Christianity, but was not a part of it. By its nature, celibacy contributes little to the quality of the character in a man and much less in a woman. Fruitfulness is God's law of nature. Barrenness leads to extinction. Celibacy had soon become such a dominant law of the apostate church, that it required hiding the scriptures from the lay members. Such confusion and interpolation of the scriptures were fertile fields for superstition and the perversion of true history. Under the influences of Greek Gnostic thinking and Roman laws, the principles of Christianity suffered worse than it did through the centuries of barbaric persecution. From among these amalgamated substitutions for the gospel came our time-honored traditions. They were so far from the original teachings that when the scriptures were exposed to thinking people, it caused a great reformation. Paul the Apostle foresaw the apostasy of Christianity and warned the members of the church about it. Celibacy, among other things, he said, was a doctrine of devils. See 1 Tim 4, 1-3. Jesus Christ never omitted fulfilling a single law of God. It would not have been his privilege to obey one law and neglect or reject another. Only the 179 apostate priests of today believe they can do that. Fundamentally, the question is not, what proof do we have that Jesus was married? But rather, where is there any proof that celibacy was ever a doctrinal law of God? The first commandment given to man was the law of marriage for the purpose of multiplying and replenishing the earth. Jesus never condemned it, nor did he have a right or reason to refuse obedience to that divine law. 180, Chapter 18, Jesus and the Law of Moses.